They say you don't really know yourself until you've been locked in a cell, stripped of everything, left alone with your thoughts. I used to believe I was a survivor, a man who could adapt to anything. But La Sante prison had a way of testing that. Now, after years behind these walls, I know one thing. I will not die here. My name doesn't matter anymore. Inside La Sante, I am just a number. A body. A shadow in a place meant to break men. But before this, before the concrete walls and locked doors, I had a life. I was raised in Marseille, in the kind of neighborhood where you learn two things quickly: how to fight and how to keep your mouth shut. My father worked on the docks, a hard man with harder fists. My mother cleaned houses for people who barely looked at her. We weren't criminals, but we weren't far from it either. By the time I was 15, I had already learned how to steal. Not for fun, not for thrills, for survival. And by 20, I had graduated from petty theft to something more lucrative. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't sloppy. But I made one mistake. And in my world, one mistake is all it takes. The job was supposed to be clean. A bank transfer scam. Not a robbery. No weapons, no blood, just numbers moving from one account to another. I had a crew, a good one. Luke, the hacker. David, the inside man. And me, the one who handled the details, the one who made sure nothing could go wrong. Except something did. The night we were set to move the money, David disappeared. An hour later, police kicked down my door. They had everything: bank records, fake IDs, surveillance footage. Evidence I never left behind. Because it wasn't me who left it. David sold us out. By morning, I was in handcuffs, standing in front of a judge who barely looked at me before sentencing me to 15 years in La Sante. No trial worth speaking of. No second chances. And just like that, my life was over. Prison isn't about punishment. It's about control. La Sante is built to make you feel small, trapped, forgotten. The cells are bare concrete, freezing in the winter, suffocating in the summer. The food is barely edible, the air thick with the stink of sweat, rot, and desperation. Men go crazy in here. Some lose themselves to violence, others to silence. I chose neither. Instead, I watched. I studied the guards, their rotations, their habits. I learned who could be bribed, who could be threatened, who was untouchable. Most importantly, I learned how men had tried to escape before and why they failed. For the first year, I told myself escaping was impossible. I convinced myself that waiting it out was the only choice. Then, one day, I got a letter. There was no return address, no name. Just one sentence. David is living in Nice under a new name. I stared at the words until they blurred. And in that moment, I made my choice. I wasn't going to wait. I wasn't going to serve my sentence. I was going to escape. Prison breaks don't happen overnight. They take patience, planning, and a level of control that most men inside La Sante don't have. I wasn't about to make the same mistakes as the ones who tried before me. I would do this right. If you want to break out of a prison, you have to know it better than the men who built it. La Sante is old, but it has been rebuilt, reinforced, modernized over the years. Every past escape attempt taught them something new, and they plugged every weakness they found. The walls? Too high to climb. The security cameras? Upgraded. The guards? Taught to expect everything. But even the best systems have flaws. And flaws can be used. I spent my days watching, learning. I counted the steps of every guard, memorized their break schedules, the way they moved when they were tired, distracted, or lazy. Some guards did their jobs like machines. Some were bullies. They got too much pleasure from this place. And some were just men in uniforms. I needed one of those men. After 6 months of watching, I found him. Gerard. He was young, new to the job, still uncomfortable in his prison guard skin. The older guards mocked him, called him soft. He smoked too much, checked his phone when he thought no one was looking. Most importantly, he was in debt. I heard him whisper about it in the yard one morning. A bad gambling habit had left him owing money to the wrong people. Desperation makes men useful. One evening, as Gerard made his rounds, I made sure to be the last one in the hallway before lockdown. As he passed, I whispered just loud enough for him to hear. I know a way to make money. A lot of it. He stiffened, didn't look at me, just kept walking. But that night, when he passed by again, he stopped outside my cell. What are you talking about? He muttered. I leaned forward, voice low. How much do you owe? 50 grand? 70? More. He flinched, eyes darting around to make sure no one else heard. That was all I needed. He was hooked. Now, I just had to reel him in. With Gerard on the hook, I had access to information I never could have gotten alone. I learned about the routine of the night shift, the places where the cameras had blind spots, and most importantly, how the prison handled its trash. Twice a week, before dawn, a garbage truck entered La Sante through a small service gate at the back of the prison. The guards barely checked it. The truck left with piles of trash bags, and once it was outside, the prison barely thought about it. That was my way out. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed at least one more man. Someone strong. Someone desperate. Someone I could trust. Jacques. Jacques had been inside for 10 years, long enough to know how things worked, but not long enough to be broken by it. He was an engineer before all this, a man who understood structures, mechanics, and how to get things done. More importantly, he had no one waiting for him on the outside. That made him dangerous. When I told him the plan, he laughed. Not because he thought it was stupid, because he thought it could actually work. Now, we needed two things. A way to hide inside the garbage truck without being noticed. A distraction big enough to keep the guards from checking it too closely. Jacques had an idea for the first problem. If we could get into the prison laundry, we could steal sheets and pack ourselves into the trash bags, hidden under piles of dirty clothes. For the second problem, we needed a distraction. Something that would draw attention away from the loading area. Something big enough that no one would be paying attention to garbage bags. And for that, we had to start a riot. Everything was in place. We had the weak guard, the hidden route, and the distraction planned. In 3 nights, the garbage truck would come again, and we would be inside it. If we failed, we'd disappear into solitary confinement. If we succeeded, we would never see La Sante again. The moment you decide to escape, you stop being a prisoner. You become a ghost, moving through the prison like you're already gone. You see things differently, the way guards react when the power flickers, the places where shadows linger longer than they should, the inmates who talk too much, and the ones who know how to keep their mouths shut. You start thinking in seconds, in timing, in consequences. And in 3 nights, I wouldn't be here anymore. A riot is a fragile thing. You can't force it. You plant the seed and let it grow. We needed something big enough to pull every guard's attention away from the service gate, but small enough not to shut the entire prison down. It had to feel real, like something that could have happened without our influence. That's where Rafik came in. He wasn't part of our escape, but he didn't need to be. Rafik had spent the last 4 years waiting for an appeal that would never come. When the guards beat him half to death last week for mouthing off, something in him snapped. He was angry, violent, a man looking for a reason to explode. I gave him one. A whispered sentence, nothing more. They're moving you next week. No appeal. No warning. I saw his hands clench into fists, his jaw tighten. That was all it took. By tomorrow, Rafik would start a fight with the wrong inmate, and before the guards could stop it, the entire block would be on fire. With the riot in motion, Jacques and I focused on getting into the laundry. We needed to steal sheets, towels, anything we could wrap around ourselves inside the garbage bags so we wouldn't be noticed. The laundry room was near the kitchens, where inmates worked on rotation. Jacques knew a guy, a cook named Philippe, who hated the guards more than he hated the food they made him cook. For a few cigarettes and a favor he wouldn't live long enough to call in, Philippe got us inside. We worked fast, stuffing as many sheets as we could under our prison clothes, hiding them until the moment we'd need them. By the time we walked out, the countdown had begun. Everything was set. We had our disguises. We had our distraction. We had one shot. The riot started 15 minutes before the garbage truck arrived. I heard Rafik scream first, followed by the sound of bodies slamming against metal tables. Then, a siren. Then, more screaming. Jacques and I moved fast, slipping out of our cell before lockdown started. We met in the service corridor, where Gerard was already waiting. His face was pale. His hands were shaking as he unlocked the side door. I'm going to lose my job for this. I clapped a hand on his shoulder. You were never here. Then we ran. The service gate was open, the garbage truck already backed in, its massive metal arms lifting bins into the back. Jacques and I grabbed the largest bags, stuffing ourselves inside, wrapping the stolen sheets tight around us. The smell was unbearable, but freedom smells like rot sometimes. I forced myself to stay still, to breathe slow, to wait. The truck lurched forward, rolling toward the gate that led outside the prison. 10 seconds. 9. I heard guards yelling at each other over the riot. 8. A searchlight passed over the truck, but didn't stop. 7. The last checkpoint. 6. A guard knocked on the side of the truck. Hurry the hell up. 5. The driver muttered something. The engine roared to life again. 4. We were moving. 3. The gates opened. 2. The truck rolled past the final wall of La Sante. 1. And just like that, we were gone. The moment we passed through the gates of La Sante, I knew we weren't free yet. The prison was behind us, but the real world? That was an entirely different kind of trap. Inside, you know the rules. Outside, the whole country was a cage, and every set of eyes was a lock waiting to snap shut. But for now, we were moving. And that was enough. Buried in trash. The garbage truck rumbled through the dark streets of Paris, bouncing over potholes, the engine roaring like a beast that didn't care what it carried. I was wedged deep inside the filth, wrapped in stolen sheets, trying not to breathe too hard. Beside me, Jacques was doing the same, silent, still. The truck jerked to a stop. My pulse slammed against my ribs. Were we already caught? I heard voices outside. What's the delay? A pause. The driver, our contact, responded in a bored tone. Traffic. You want me to fly over it? A grunt. A car door slamming. Then we were moving again. I let out a breath. Not yet. But soon. The dumping point. After 20 minutes, the truck pulled into a waste processing facility on the outskirts of the city. Not a landfill, too obvious. Instead, this was an industrial sorting center, where trash got separated, compacted, sent off to wherever it needed to go. Our driver took us exactly where he promised, a back lot, out of sight from security cameras. The engine cut off. Silence. Then a knock on the side of the truck. You're clear. Move. Jacques kicked his way out of his bag first, scrambling onto the filthy pavement. I followed, my body stiff, muscles aching from staying still too long. The driver, a thick man with a shaved head and a cigarette tucked behind his ear, nodded at us. Lose the clothes. Fast. He tossed a duffel bag at our feet. Inside, jeans, hoodies, sneakers. Nothing special. Just enough to make us look normal. Jacques and I peeled off our prison uniforms, shoving them under piles of trash. I glanced at the driver. Payment? He shook his head. I didn't do this for money. I did it because I hate that place. Fair enough. He pointed at a side gate, just past a row of dumpsters. That leads to the train yard. You got 2 hours before the cops start locking the city down. After that, you're on your own. 2 hours. We had to disappear before then. Blending in. The Paris train system is a maze. That was the only advantage we had. We stuck together, walking like men who had places to be, not like two escapees running for their lives. The news hadn't hit yet. Nobody was looking at us. But soon, every station, every street, every bus and taxi would be another risk. We needed to get out of the city. Fast. Where? Jacques asked under his breath as we passed through the turnstiles, stepping onto a nearly empty platform. I thought fast. Spain? No, the borders would be swarming with patrols soon. Belgium? Maybe, but we didn't have the money or the contacts. Then it hit me. The South. Marseille. Jacques frowned. Back where you started? I nodded. I know people there. People who don't ask questions. And if I was going to disappear forever, I needed to go back to where everything started. Because there was one last piece of unfinished business. Ghosts of the past. We boarded a train heading south, sticking to the quietest car, keeping our heads down. As the city faded behind us, I checked the train's Wi-Fi. The news was everywhere now. Prison break in Paris. 2 inmates escaped from La Santé. Manhunt underway, police warn public to stay vigilant. Escapees still at large, believed to be armed and dangerous. I almost laughed. Dangerous. If they only knew who the real criminals were. Jacques leaned over, looking at my phone screen. They'll find us. I shook my head. Not if we move fast enough. But I wasn't just running. I had one more thing to do. Something that had been burning in my gut since the moment they locked me up. I needed to find David, the man who betrayed me. And this time, I wouldn't make the same mistake twice. The train rattled south through the French countryside, pulling us further from Paris, from La Santé, from the manhunt that would only grow louder with each hour. But I wasn't just running. I was heading straight for the one thing I couldn't leave behind. David, the man who sold me out. The reason I had lost years of my life behind concrete walls. He thought he had buried me. He thought I was gone forever. But now, I was coming for him. The last stop. We arrived in Marseille just before sunrise. The city was waking up, street vendors setting up stalls, Fishermen unloading their catch at the old port. Early risers sipping coffee in tiny cafes. I knew this place. Every alley. Every side street. And I knew how to move without being seen. Jacques and I split up. Not forever, just long enough to get what we needed. New clothes. Fake IDs. Cash. I had contacts here. Old friends who knew better than to ask questions. One of them, Andre, ran a bar near the docks. A quiet place where nobody cared who you were, as long as you paid. I walked in, took a seat at the counter. He looked up, and for a second, his face froze. Then he just sighed. You really did it. I nodded. I need cash. A phone. And an address. Andre didn't ask whose address. He just poured me a drink and picked up his phone. Hunting the traitor. An hour later, I had what I needed. David was living under a new name, in a new apartment, with a new life. But he hadn't gone far. Still in France. Still in my city. Like he thought he had nothing to fear. He was wrong. Jacques sat across from me in a rented room, checking his stolen pistol, wiping it down with a cloth. You sure about this? He asked. I nodded. He put me in that cell. I'm making sure I never go back. Jacques sighed. He didn't like it, but he understood. We weren't just escaped convicts anymore. We were men with a mission. Face to face. David's apartment was in a quiet part of town, the kind of place where no one asks questions if you keep your head down. We waited until nightfall. Then we moved. The door was too easy. One shove, and we were inside. David was sitting at a table, a glass of wine in one hand, scrolling through his phone with the other. He looked up, and for a moment, he didn't react. His mind couldn't process what he was seeing. Then, his face turned white. No, that's not possible. I stepped forward. Miss me. He pushed back his chair, tried to run, but Jacques blocked the door. David's voice was shaking. Look, I didn't have a choice. The cops, they had everything on us. If I didn't give them something, they were going to bury me. I grabbed him by the shirt, yanked him forward. So you buried me instead. His hands trembled. Please, just let me go. You're free now. You got what you wanted. I shook my head. Not yet. I pulled out the gun. The final decision. The thing about revenge? It doesn't bring back what you lost. David was a coward. A man who sold out his friends because he was weak. I could end it right here. One shot, and it would be over. But then what? The second I pulled the trigger, I'd be a dead man walking. No more escape. No more future. Jacques was watching me. Waiting. David's breath came in sharp gasps. I lowered the gun. You're lucky. My voice was quiet. You don't deserve it. But you're lucky. David nodded furiously, eyes wet with panic. Thank you. You won't see me again. I swear. I leaned in close. If I do, I won't hesitate next time. Then, we walked out. The road ahead. We left Marseille that night. Took the money, the passports, the second chance we gave ourselves. David? He was someone else's problem now. Jacques and I had one goal left. Disappear. For good. We headed south, toward the border, toward a new life waiting on the other side. Would we make it? Maybe. But one thing was certain. We would never see La Sante again.